Hello there. Hope you are doing well. So here we have one of the reading comprehension question. So in which we find out a passage is given, and on the basis of the given passage, we find out some questions also uh, given to answer. Okay, let's look at the passage and the direction of it. The direction stated that answer the following questions based on the information given below. So, what we will do, we will just read the passage and try to understand what this passage is all about. Um, so, it is stated that this is inspirational, I suppose, because it means that each of us is truly unique, not just in our genetic makeup, but even in the way our brains change over time. It is also depressing. Why? Because it makes the task of the neuroscientist daunting almost beyond imagination. For any given experience, orderly change could involve 1,000 neurons, a million neurons, or even the entire brain, with the pattern of change different in every brain. Now, if we see that the paragraph of the first pass of the passage indicating what the author starts by discussing the uniqueness, right? Uniqueness of the what? That's called as a human brain. Human brain, isn't it? Human brain. So, not just genetically, but also in how it changes over time, right? Over time. So, it is also stated that what? Due to it experiences, right or not? So, while the uniqueness is inspirational, if you talk about that, uniqueness is inspirational. At the same time, um, it presents a significant challenge for neuroscientists. For any experience, changes could involve thousands of millions of neurons, with each brain showing a different pattern of change. And this makes studying the brain extremely what? Extremely complex, isn't it? Complex. Okay. Uh, Similar to that, if we look at the second paragraph of the passage, it is stated worse, worse still, even if we had the ability to take a snapshot of all of the brain's 86 billion neurons and then to stimulate the state of those neurons in a computer, that vast pattern would mean nothing outside the body of the brain that produced it. This is perhaps the most egregious way in which the IP metaphor has distorted our thinking about human functioning. Whereas computers do store exact copies of data, copies that can persist unchanged for long periods of time. Even if the power has been turned off, the brain maintains our intellect only as long as it remains alive. There is no on off switch. Either the brain keeps functioning or we disappear. What is more, as the neurobiologist Stephen Roach pointed out in The Future of the Brain 2005, a snapshot of the brain's current state might also be meaningless unless we knew the entire life history of that brain's owner, perhaps even about the social context in which he or she was raised. Now, here the author continues to elaborate on the difficulties of understanding the brain, isn't it? So, even if one could map all 86 billion neurons, right? 86 billion neurons. So, the problem is not only capturing the vast network, but also in the fact that this information would be known as a meaningless, right? So, and it is also stated meaningless outside the specific brain if originated from. The author criticizes the information process, which is known as a IP, right? So, metaphor which compares the brain to a computer, not like computers that store exact copies of data. The brain's functioning is inseparable from its ongoing activity. A snapshot of a brain state is useless without understanding its entire life history and social context. Okay, so then we follow the third one. The third one stated that think how difficult this problem is. So the author delves deeper into the complexity of understanding the brain and find out nothing but it's uh, very difficult. The problem is very difficult to understand even the basics of how the brain maintains the human intellect. We might need to know not just the current state of all 86 billion neurons and their 100 trillion interconnections, not just the varying strength with which they are connected, and not just the states of more than 1000 proteins that exist at each connection point, but how the moment to moment activity of the brain contributes to the integrity of the system. Add to this the uniqueness of each brain, brought about in part because of the uniqueness of each person's life history, and Candle's prediction starts to sound overly simplistic, overly optimistic, isn't it? So, to truly understand how the brain maintains intellect, one must account for the a state of billion of neurons, state of billion state of billions of neurons. So, or trillions of connections, varying strength of these connections, protein states, and more. The uniqueness of each brain shaped by individual life history, life history, right? Individual life history, right? So, adds to the challenge, making even optimistic prediction. So, Candle's prediction by scientists like Candle seem, that's something called as a uh, unrealistic because it is stated overly optimistic, so something like a unrealistic. Now uh, the next paragraph, which is stated, meanwhile vast sums of money are being raised for brain research based in some cases on faulty ideas and promises that cannot be kept. The most blatant instance of neuroscience gone awry, documented recently in a report in Scientific American, concerns the $1.3 billion Human Brain Project launched by the European Union in 2013. Convinced by the charismatic Henry Markham that he could create a simulation of the entire human brain on a supercomputer by the year 2023, and that such a model would revolutionize the treatment of Alzheimer's disease and other disorders. European EU official or EU officials funded his project with virtually no restriction. Less than 2 years into it, the project turned into a brain wreck, and Markham was asked to step down. So, the European um, official, you can say that. So, this paragraph discusses the misdirection of neuroscience research effort and fueled by unrealistic promises. The author, you can talk about that, mentions the example of what human brain, right? Human brain project. So this human brain project is nothing but a 1.3 billion, um, you can say that, initiative funded by the European Union, led by Henry Markram, right? So it is also said that what the project aimed to simulate the human brain by 2023, right? So to revolutionize treatments for neurological disorders. However, due to unrealistic expectations, right, you can say that, and a lack of substantial progress, the project failed, and Malcolm had to uh, step down, isn't it? So the last paragraph stated, "We are organisms, not computers. Get over it. Let's get on with the business of trying to understand ourselves, but without being encumbered by unnecessary intellectual baggage." The IP metaphor has had a half-century run, producing few, if any, insight along the way. The time has come to hit the delete key. Right. Now, this last paragraph pointed about what? Um, Conclusion by emphasizing that humans are not humans are not computers, isn't it? So we are organisms, not computers. So in that case, humans are not computers, and it's time to move beyond the, you can say that, the IP metaphor that has dominated neuroscience for, you can say that, a half century without producing significant insights. They advocate for a new direction in understanding the human brain that is free from outdated conceptual baggage, isn't it? So, if you see that, the text gives all about that man's human brain with a computer. So the tone and the style of this passage can be known as a what? Uh, critical one, critical, and you can say that adjective in nature. Uh, The author critiques the prevalent use of the IP metaphor in neuroscience and the misguided direction of some research efforts. There is also a reflective and cautionary, you can say that, undertone, right? A warning against oversimplified views of brain function. So that what you can say the tone of the text. Similar to that, if you talk about the style of the text, the style of the passage is academic and analytical one, analytical, employing technical language and reference to scientific research. The author uses, you can say, persuasive, informative and persuasive, right? Techniques to argue against the IP metaphor and for a more grounded approach to brain research. Okay, so as far as if we talk about the main idea of the text, the main argument of the passage is that the human brain's complexity. What is that? Human complexity, brain's complexity. Um, and uniqueness cannot be adequately understood or simulated using the you can say IP, which is known as information processing. Information processing, processing. So that metaphor that compares the brain to a computer, the author techniques the author criticizes or critiques this metaphor for oversimplifying brain function and leading to misguided research efforts such as the Human Brain Project. So they advocate for a new approach um, to neuroscience that moves, you can say that beyond the um, out, outdated, you can say that model and better accounts for the intricate and dynamic nature for the uh, of the human brain, isn't it? So that's what all about this text. I hope you understood the whole text. Let's jump to the question and try to understand what does the question ask here. So the question started in the first one is what? What is the primary region? What is the primary region the author believes uh, that simulating the human brain on a computer is flawed endeavor, isn't it? So the question is asking for the main region, main region. So the author believes that trying to simulate the human brain on a computer is a not a good idea, not a good idea. So the author has given multiple regions throughout the passage, but if you see that this question is looking for the most important region that mentioned. So what is the primary region that the author believes that simulating the human brain on a computer is a flawed endeavor? Now look at each of the options here. The first option said the vast complexity of neuronal connections cannot be replicated accurately. So option one stated about the vast complexity of neuronal connection that cannot be replicated accurately. So this option suggested that the main region is the complexity of the connection between neuron neurons, which is indeed one of the challenges. You can say that neuron, which is nothing but one of the challenges mentioned by the author. However, if you talk about that, this is not the primary focus of the author's argument. So hence we can consider option one cannot be considered the answer to it. Okay. So because option one mentions the complexity of the brain's connection, which is a challenge, but not the main focus, isn't it? So that's why we cannot consider option one is the primary region. It is the challenge. Second, the brain's functionality, right? The brain's functionality cannot be understood without its life history and social context. The brain's functionality cannot be understood without its life history and social context. Yes, this could be called as the primary function, right? Um, sorry, primary region, because this option highlights what? Highlights highlights the author's main argument that understanding the brain requires what? No, requires knowing the entire life history and social background, right? These two things of the person. Even if you could replicate all the brains, neurons without the context of the person's life, the simulation would be called as a meaningless. Meaningless. So in that case, we can consider this could be the primary reason that the author believes that simulating the human brain on a computer is a flawed endeavor. So two would be the answer to this. Let's look at the other options. So third option stated, computers lack the capacity to simulate the dynamic nature of the brain's neuron. Now, this option suggests that computers cannot simulate how neurons in the brain constantly change and interact, right? While this is true, it is only a part of the broader argument the author is making, but this cannot be called as the primary region. So, four, the IP metaphor has led to misconception about brain functioning. So, if you talk about IP functioning, right? So, IP metaphor. So you can say that IP metaphor is called as information processing metaphor, which compares the brain to a computer, has caused misunderstanding, right, about how the brain works. This is an important point made by the author, um, but is not the main reason why brain simulation is considered flawed. So in that case, if we look into it, the primary reason the author gives for why simulating the brain on a computer is flawed, right? The author talks about several challenges, isn't it? The several challenges, but at the same time, several challenges. But the main argument is that even if we could simulate all the connection and activities of the brain neurons, it would not mean anything without understanding the, you can say that, entire life story and social environment of the um, person, isn't it, or an individual. So hence we can consider option two would be correct. So we understood option one is wrong because um, it is stated about challenges but not the main focus. Um, so option three that discusses the dynamic nature of neurons, but this is also part of the broader argument, cannot be called as a primary region. Option four that talks about how the IP mind metaphor misleads our understanding, but this is about misconception rather than the impossibility of situation. So therefore, the best answer you can find out option two, right? The author stresses the importance of the brain's unique context, life history, and social background as the primary reason why a computer simulation would not work effectively, right? Hence, answer should be option two. Hope you understood this. That's all. Thank you.